So today, I was thinking about the gospel. I heard my pastor was preaching on. He's preaching on in 1 John, where it talks about how Cain's works were evil, and he hated his brother. Cain hated Abel because Cain's deeds were evil, but his brothers were righteous. And so as he talked about that, he mentioned how the two different sacrifices that were offered, one by Cain and one by Abel. One by Cain was fruits and vegetables and things from his cultivation. That was what he did. He cultivated vegetables. He cultivated food from a garden. I don't know how big the garden was. It's not the point. But we look at it and say that's the cultivation of his own work. Whereas Abel, his entire offering, if we understand what Abel had learned, like why did he offer sheep? Why was he a herder of sheep? Especially when we think about what we understand about the pre-flood environment after Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And if we look at the Garden of Eden and we go that was their food source, their expected food source was likely vegetarian. Now, this is not us trying to say that we need to go back to a vegan, vegetarian lifestyle. I like barbecue and bacon too much, so sorry, I'm not going to do that. But if you look at the offering and you go, Abel learned somewhere along the line, that a sacrifice of blood was required. Where would he have come up with that? Except that Adam and Eve, when God spoke to the serpent, he told the serpent. He didn't tell Adam. He didn't tell Eve this. He told the serpent. He told this great Leviathan. He said, one day, her seed is going to crush your head. You might bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. And they overheard that. And here's the funny thing. They believed it. Adam and Eve believed it. They trusted it. They were so impacted by what was said, they believed it. And what was God's next action? His next action was to cover their sin by the shedding of blood. And so at some point along the line, Adam and Eve, they have their children, and they teach their children, Cain and Abel, their first two sons, that the sacrifice that was required was a sacrifice that was going to be a blood sacrifice. In fact, it was a sacrifice that apparently Abel understood to be some kind of livestock. He sacrificed from his livestock. In fact, it was a sacrifice of sheep, of a lamb. And that action by Abel was a demonstration of faith that not only was this the pleasing variety of sacrifice, but that it hearkened to the promise said to the serpent in the hearing of Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve believed it so much that they taught their sons, one of which believed it and the other one did not. Now, here's the kicker. This was something my pastor pointed out. He's like, did you notice that Abel and Cain, their interaction wasn't, Cain didn't hate Abel because Abel did something to Cain. He hated Abel because his deeds were righteous. And that is an ongoing thing that you'll notice when a Christian, truly saved by the grace of God, though their sins be, like Isaiah says, though their sins are scarlet, they will be as white as snow. The hatred that is often given to Christians, at least initially. Now, when you confront somebody who's hating a Christian, they'll then refabricate their rationale. But initially, the hatred is because the works and the actions and the trust is in the righteousness of Christ, and therefore is calling us to repent of sin. It's not because we're doing something against a person. So that really brings us to the gospel that was taught literally at the very beginning. Adam and Eve in the garden had sinned, and as soon as they sinned, or very shortly after they sinned, they didn't confess to it. They offered plenty of excuses, and we've done that plenty of times our own selves with our own excuses, blame shifting, labeling, recasting our sin, when in reality we need to own up to our sin. We need to face it, not facing the sin, but admitting that our sin is what causes us to have guilt before God, and that sin, the only hope it has, is in the promise that was delivered in the beginning. And this is the promise that we as Christians, that we proclaim today. Now, we today in 2025 may not have, or whatever year you're watching this, may not have actually seen and touched and heard the physical person of Christ himself like the apostles did. We may not have heard his actual voice sitting across the room from us. We may not have actually touched his garment, or been like Peter, lifted out of the water by him with his physical hand. But a lot of that physicality, which I believe is overblown, is often a roadblock to the gospel. Remember what Jesus said to Thomas is, blessed are those who believe but have not seen. And if you look over at what happened with Abel, he may not have seen or heard that promise given by God in the garden, but he believed it nonetheless. And it changed his actions. And yes, those actions resulted in his death. But as we're also told in the New Testament, Abel's blood still speaks to this day of a promise. And that promise is what we believe. The gospel as it was preached even in the beginning in the garden. And that same gospel preached today. That you are saved by faith in the work that Jesus completed. Fully obedient to God, all the way to the point where that obedience required his death. And then his death paying the price of a sin life he did not have, he did not commit. Like it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it says that for our sake, God made Christ to be sin, not to sin, but to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. And that's the gospel. And that's all I have for you.